Welcome to the Estate of Reality podcast, where we talk about the real world of real estate. Join in and listen to two of the smartest people in real estate as they talk about the real reality of real estate. It's nothing like reality TV. This is the real world. If you are planning to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, or if you are a real estate agent, this podcast is for you. Your hosts are Melissa Haley, broker for the North Texas Top Team and CEO of Agent Advantage Coaching and Training, as well as Stephen Etzel, real estate broker, instructor, and owner of Stephen Etzel Real Estate Consulting. Join them as they talk about all things real estate and subscribe today to catch all of the episodes.
Well, welcome everybody. I am Melissa Haley, CEO of Agent Advantage Coaching and Training and the broker for North Texas Top Team. How is everybody doing today?
Yeah, absolutely wonderful.
Fabulous. Fantastic. Oh, yay. I'm so excited. I'm so excited we have you here today, Miss Amy. Stephen, introduce yourself real quick, my friend.
I am Steve Etzel, the other half of the most intelligent people in real estate, owner broker of actually independent realty. And I also do Steve Etzel consulting as well and instructing.
Yeah. And for sure, one of the smartest people in real estate.
Melissa makes me look smart. That's what it is.
Well, Amy, we're so glad that you came to talk with us today because today is all about property management, right? And you, my friend, I should just dub you Queen of Property Management. That's what it should be. That should be your new title. I wish I had like a little crown. I could just like, put a little graphic on there. So, Amy, before you got into where we are today, which is the whole property management thing, do you mind giving everybody just a little synopsis of who you are and how you got here? And just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of dive in and talk about what you're doing right now that's super important that people should know about investing in real estate.
Sounds awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I love to be able to share. Property management is my love. A lot of people think I'm crazy, but that's okay. It is definitely a special part of real estate, and it's one that I love. So, but a little bit about me. I've had my license almost 30 years. I can't believe it. I got out of college and got my license right away. I was working as a receptionist in a real estate company, and they talked me into getting my real estate license because it would be so fun. And then I learned all about living on commission and having those ups and downs as the real estate agents do. And so at one point in time, I got offered the opportunity to purchase a company that had a sales force and a property management department. And I said, oh, that sounds like fun. And I knew absolutely nothing about rentals. I thought people just showed up and paid rent. How hard could it be? And so I've learned a lot over the last 20 years doing property management. And now I'm the owner broker of A+ Management here in Plano, Texas. And we manage a little under 200 single family houses, and it's a lot of fun. We get to meet a lot of cool people that are moving into the area and choosing to rent for various reasons, and working with a lot of investors. A lot of our investors are based all over the world. So we're dealing with people in every single time zone there possibly could be in the world every day. So it's really exciting. It's a lot of fun. And so happy to be here. So thank you.
Hard to keep track of all that and get sleep.
It's true. It's true. It's really wonderful, though. I mean, we've been so lucky to be able to have so much technology to be able to communicate with owners around the world. They don't have to worry about staying up till midnight to do a Zoom call with us. They can just pop over a note and we can pop stuff back over to them. We have a lot of tools for them that we share electronically so that they can see and manage their accounts and look at their accounts in real time. So it gives them a comfort level to be able to handle it anywhere in the world that they happen to be. So it works out for all of us.
That's awesome.
That's very cool. Well, so I know that being in property management, it is, like you said, it's very different from what we do in the residential resale side, right? Or even different from, commercial, and different from from farm and ranch, right? So we have this property management, like little section here. what's one of the main, like today, if I said, what's your big hot topic that you need to focus on, that's something that's coming down the pipe or people need to know about or whatever, what would you say the number one thing is that is changing right now in the property management sector?
Sure. Well, like real estate, we have lots of changes that happen in our little section as well. We get new forms, new rules, new regulations all the time. And I think for us, one of the things that we have to really stay on top of is compliance. And whether that's compliance with the city, with the homeowners association, with the county, what the state's doing. We have state laws, county laws, city laws, all the way down to the neighborhood rules and regulations, and having to manage all of that for hundreds of different properties, hundreds of different tenants, hundreds of different owners. That's a huge part of our job. We've seen a lot of cities really struggling with rental compliance. And so in the past, people could just rent their house anytime, anywhere to anyone that they wanted to. Well, cities said, hey, we're not necessarily wanting to have as many renters in our city as we have currently. So we're going to do some rental registration, and we're going to put some rental limits on what can be rented and how long it can be rented for and who's allowed to rent those properties. And so there's a lot of compliance that's come down. And it started out as, people complaining that, hey, my neighbor isn't taking care of their fence. And so because a renter lives there, we want the city to go deal with this renter. Well, the city doesn't have a relationship with the renter. The city has a relationship with the owner who owns the house. And so they developed rental registration at the city level to require homeowners to actually register their rental properties with the city so that the city could start inspecting those rental properties. And there's a whole inspection process and approval process for the cities. And every city has different rules and regulations to be able to have a rental within the city. And that goes for Dallas, Garland, Mesquite, Little Elm. Anna just started rental registration year before last. And so there's a lot of compliance rules and regulations that are changing in the property management space. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we're challenged with, is keeping track of that, especially in such a large metropolitan area like we have. And we have so many cities and people moving back and forth all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, Stephen, do you agree that on the residential resale side, we still have to keep up with all of the changes and all the stuff that's coming?
They said it sounds a lot like what we got to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But on the flip side, that did a lot of that, just out of curiosity, that happened out of temporary leases. Did it actually happen because they want to maintain the properties more, and they really have a sense of urgency that they really do need to maintain the properties? Because they say, I've read some HUD documentation, let's put it that way, that says if you own property, take better care of property than if you rent property. I don't necessarily believe that, but in some situations it might be true, might not be true. I don't know. But is that what triggered that, or is it the fact of the short-term lease, or how they're leasing those properties?
Yeah, the short-term lease really became an issue in the last couple of years. The rental registration started probably 7 or 8 years ago, primarily from people complaining that rental properties were not taken care of as well as they should be. We have a lot of different people that move into our rental properties. We have some that are moving straight out of an apartment. They've never owned a house. They've never lived in a house before. They don't know necessarily all the aspects that are required to maintain that property. We have some that are homeowners that come in and they just pick right up where they left off at their last house and maintain it as if it was their own. So you're right. We have a large variety of tenants living in those properties, and some do a better job of taking care of them than others. And so the cities came down and said, well, hey, we're gonna hold y'all to a different standard to make sure that these rental properties are up to what they felt was the requirements within that city, to make sure that those properties weren't being not taken care of by the tenants. And so there are also fees required for rental registration. So there is a profit and a revenue system.
I was gonna say, there's got to be something here. There's got to be underlying money makers of that.
And some cities are really, really tough about their inspecting. They will not allow you to turn your water on unless you have got a clear inspection report. Before you can get that, before you can connect your utilities. And so other cities are like, as long as you register so we know who's living there and you pay us our fee, then that's it. You're done. No inspection required. So the variations are huge on what they require city to city. But yes, there's definitely a revenue source as part of rental registration.
I'm interested in what the fight back was for landlords and tenants in that little situation, since it is against the bundle of rights.
Yeah,
it probably goes back to code compliance. It goes back to, they have the right of, the Enabling Act and all the rest of it. But I mean, I'm sure there was some pretty much feedback back and forth going, well, wait a second here. This is our property. We should be able to do what we want with it. Was there any, do you know of any major battles that went over that before it actually passed?
I was thinking.
Yeah. There was quite a bit. I can tell you so for instance, like in Mesquite, if you have a property that's got some foundation issues, and that's very popular throughout our area, right? You have a property that has foundation issues, they can require you to fix the foundation before you can lease that property. That can be part of the inspection report. Now, if you buy a house that has foundation problems, there's nobody there to say, hey, you must fix your foundation. So I think a lot of the issues with the landlords was not only, it was more of a, hey, why do we have to fix all this just because it's a rental? Not, if you're a homeowner, you don't have to fix that. If you're a homeowner, and you live in an area that doesn't have an HOA, you can have your grass be 3 feet tall. But if you're a tenant, you're not allowed to have your grass be 3 feet tall. So they did put some additional requirements on rentals, and some landlords felt that it was a little bit on the discriminatory side.
Yeah, it seems egregious.
Well, in some aspects, I look at it like this. As a landlord, I'm kind of happy over it somewhat, because it does got to help maintain property, but it does seem a little bit biased.
Yeah, it does. And there's some interesting things, such as the Dallas city registration requires that the person managing the property, whether it's the homeowner or a property management company, be available to be at the property within an hour and a half if there's a major catastrophe. So if we have a lot of investors, and we have tons of investors from California, New York, Ohio, Chicago, they can't be at a property within an hour and a half. So, they're forced into having a property manager manage those properties for them, which, can be good and bad, but
it's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
What I'm also thinking is a lot of times I remember they were talking about these temporary leases. They were trying to do hotel motel taxes, kind of like in Austin, they have different requirements that they have to do hotel motel. Down in Arlington, you only put them in certain spots. I mean, I understand that. And some of the cities are starting to put restrictions on. Grapevine was going to put restrictions on, but it got overturned, so there's a lot of different things going on. But if you look at it, they were trying to put those hotel motel taxes and try to tax people. This is just another way of taxing.
Yeah,
it is. It's
so I was just like, listen to this, go, wait a second here. This is just another way of getting around the fact of doing hotel motel tax register. That's brilliant.
And
and it can get really expensive.
We got it solved.
Yeah, and I think people might be saying, but wait, you can't discriminate on housing, but our investors are not a protected class.
They're not.
They're not protected. It's discriminate all you want against an investor because it's not protected. But I have a question, Amy, because you were talking about like the grass being 3 feet tall. Or maybe the fence is falling over or something, but aren't there already city code things? I mean, does the city code really allow for the grass to be 3 feet tall?
They don't, but unless city code goes out and inspects it, it's not going to happen.
Right. So we just traded one inspector for another. Instead of sending city code out for code compliance, hey, my neighbor's grass is too tall, we're instead saying, hey, the rental house has got to.
I was going to say, now you got a target.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it could have been, some of those things could have been addressed through code compliance if we'd maybe had enough people doing code compliance, right?
Yeah.
So,
but they got a whole department just for the rentals.
You're talking about huge amounts of money. I mean, you're talking $100 a house. There's 50,000 rentals in Dallas alone, $50,000 a year just in, registration fees for the application. Then if they come out and inspect the property, and I had a property that had a leaky faucet. So the inspector comes out and he says, hey, it's dripping. You got to get this faucet fixed. No problem. So we get the faucet replaced. I send him a picture. Here's the new faucet. Here's the inspection report, the receipt showing we paid for the new faucet. We got charged a re-inspection fee for them to do the paperwork to clear the default of the first inspection. So there's a lot of money involved in all this.
You know what this sounds like to me? The old Section 8. Remember the old Section 8? Did you ever do Section 8 management?
We used to do Section 8 management. It's gotten more complicated to do Section 8 these days than in the past.
I remember doing it 25 years ago, and it was a little bit more or less lenient on what, it was a lot lenient on what we're doing, but we still had to get it inspected. So every time we would turn, you get it inspected, you get a quarterly inspection. That's what it sounds like to me, that's what the cities are starting to do.
Well, and to a point, the reason that Section 8 was doing it was to make sure that the landlords weren't being slumlords, right?
That's exactly right.
That you're putting a family in a house where you're getting a subsidy and that they're paying for the rent for those people. They want to make sure they're in a good
But that's
property.
justifying because they're paying 90%, 80%, 20%.
Right.
This doesn't justify going, hey, wait a second here. We got this, registration. We can just go do whatever we want to do. That's basically, to me, taking advantage of the system in a sense of overpowering the boundaries.
But I'm wondering, because it doesn't seem like the new inspections are really all about tenants being in safe, healthy properties, right? It seems like we're just trying to make sure code compliance is doing their job.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody's getting a survey. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned short terms. So the Airbnb thing, has really ballooned, over the past several years. And you used to see, a couple of Airbnbs here and a couple VRBOs over there, and a lot of times it was in more popular areas, that have theme parks and attractions that people wanted to go and visit and wanted to have a large family be able to go somewhere and not have to, get 6 different hotel rooms. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Well, Arlington was one of the biggest ones that came down and said, hey, we have a problem with all of these Airbnbs. And people were like, hey, Cowboys Stadium, Texas Rangers Stadium, Six Flags. This is going to be a great place to have an Airbnb because people are going to come in for the Cowboys games and the Rangers games and such. So you're right. Arlington did say, okay, well, we're going to allow Airbnbs only in a certain area close to those attractions. But other cities, Grapevine, tried to pass it and didn't get it to go through. Allen just passed an ordinance prohibiting Airbnbs and trying to work through the regulations and how they're going to deal with the Airbnb problem. In Plano, there's been a lot of stuff on the news. I saw it last night on the news again.
Yeah.
There are a couple of problem houses, and there are problem houses everywhere. But there are a couple of problem houses. They happen to be Airbnbs. And so, they're wanting to outlaw all of the Airbnbs throughout Plano because, there are a couple of bad apples. And I understand that. I don't want to live next to a party house either. But we could all end up living next to a party house.
Basically, all of them are using the law of nuisance is what they're doing.
Yeah. So what Plano did that's a little bit different, that's very strategic on Plano's part, is Plano said, hey, we're going to allow Airbnbs, but only if Airbnb does all of the collection of the hotel motel tax and pays us monthly. So they're not trying to get the individual owners to pay them, because you can imagine the accounting nightmare for that and having to have to control all of that. But they're getting Airbnb to send them the money. And you're talking $50,000 plus a month right now that Plano is receiving for the Airbnb hotel motel just in Plano.
Well, here's the weirdest thing about that. Airbnb is a marketing firm.
Right.
They're not the actual owners of the property.
Correct.
So when you're having a marketing firm pay for your fees, they're upcharging them. That's another problem you got going on here. But if you're registering, why don't they just put the register on it and have them pay and have them have to file as you're going through instead of having a marketing firm pay? That doesn't.
But the marketing fee is, the marketing company is collecting the tax though, right? They're the ones that are saying, put your credit card in to rent this place on my website. So they've got the money. Might as well just pass it on.
So Airbnb collects it and then passes it.
But then who gets the write-off?
But in most cities,
see what I'm saying?
In most cities, it doesn't work that way. Airbnb, the individual owner is required to do their own hotel motel occupancy tax.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're having a marketing firm pay it, what are they doing? Crediting it back to the owner so they can take a write-off on their taxes? That's kind of weird. That's
maybe.
Yeah.
Or the owners needs to keep better records and make sure they can just prove that this was paid on their behalf or whatever.
Yeah,
right.
or pass through. That's exactly right.
But so let me ask you another question though about Airbnb, Amy, and I don't know if you'll know this, but I know that I went to a city council meeting not that long ago. I mean, it's probably 6 months ago, because you're right. This has been going on for a long time, but it's really ramped up lately. And one of the parts of the conversation was as a city, and this was specific to Plano where I live, and they said, we are trying to get all the information. We want input from the landlords. We want input from the people that are really against it, other homeowners that are in the area, and there's a coalition and all this that were, lobbying against it. And they said, we're going to try and gather all this information, but we're also going to gather information from other cities around us that have been doing it. And there was some mention about a municipality somewhere, I don't know where, that maybe got into a lawsuit because of the way all of this was going down. And I'm not really sure what the lawsuit was about. I didn't do any research because I don't own any Airbnbs. I don't manage any Airbnbs. So I was just like, you know what, man, that just sounds really messy. But is it possible that a city has been sued over their management or mismanagement of the way they handle their registrations and Airbnbs?
Yeah, I've heard that as well. From what I understand, because the city has it zoned and every property has a zoning, it's zoned single family residential. If you put 3 families in that, that's technically not a single family usage. But so Airbnb, so the owners are saying, well, but maybe we only put a single family property, parties into a single family house. So you can't say every single Airbnb everywhere in the city is all multifamily, because it's not. So I think that's where they got into trouble, and the attorneys were telling Plano, hey, you better really kind of step back on this and make sure that you have the authority to tell people how they can use their single family housing.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the tie-in was.
Yeah. Well, they were definitely going to gather all the facts, and they're like, we're not just making a decision. Right. They were very, very clear that they were not just going to just hear one side and be done and make a decision and move along. They were very much about, I want to know everything before we want to be conservative and slow in making the decision so we can make the right decision.
Right.
Well, it's kind of like occupancy ratios. You're running that little mess too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to talk about what that is, Stephen? So anybody listening is like, I have no idea what he's talking about.
In Texas, it's two per bedroom or 3 adults per bedroom. So, you're looking at it going, that's a Texas occupancy, but the HUD occupancy is 2 per living area. So that could be anywhere you want to flop down. But the good thing about it is we run off the Texas occupancy, but that's why they now changed the law. There's property management. They changed now you can take a deposit instead of a security deposit. And I think they did that for dorms and so forth, because there are 3 adults that live in one area. But if you look at it, if you have a 4-bedroom house, that means you could put 12 people in it. Does that make sense? So now you're back to that little situation you got. So where do you fall back onto? That's the problem. I think that's exactly why they were kind of thinking to themselves, well, wait a second here. What exactly are we going to do before we end up going to AKA battle royale, if you will, over our property rights? And property rights are huge in Texas. And so I think a lot of times that if you have a leg to stand on, guess what, everybody, they're going to go to court, and not even the city can overturn them at that point in time. So it's pretty cool.
Well,
I think the bigger issue, even bigger than rental registration at the city, is HOA.
Oh man. Let's talk about those.
Hold on, some people love them and some people hate them.
I got to get my soapbox. Hold on just a second.
Okay, get the soapbox. Stand up there tall and proud. Tell us about it.
Okay.
We could talk about this for about, I don't know, eternity.
So here's the problem that we're struggling with, and that our investors are struggling with. I like HOAs. I have HOA. A lot of my properties are located in HOAs. And I think HOAs are great for maintaining architectural standards and maintaining the common areas and making sure that everybody pays their dues, and there's a place for HOAs, and I think that is great. The problem that we're having with HOAs is they have now decided to move into the management of properties. So a couple different things. First of all, they have decided that they're going to have rental limits in a neighborhood. So for instance, this neighborhood is allowed to have 10% of the total houses can be rentals, or 20% or 50% or whatever. Now, in condos, we've had occupancy limits, rental limits for years and years and years, because they haven't wanted to lose their FHA ability to finance, right? That's been a big deal with condos for years and years. Not a problem, but we're talking about single family housing is putting in rental regulations. They've said we have too many renters, and we have too many rental properties. So they're requiring registration at the HOA level, and sometimes that is a monthly fee. Sometimes that's an annual fee. And that annual fee is going to roll to the landlord, which is going to roll to the tenant, which is going to raise the rental rates. So that's an issue. And that fee is not charged to homeowners. It's only charged if it's a rental property. So again, we've had some landlords, say, hey, that's discrimination again.
Yeah.
So when you have rental caps, it prevents investors or homeowners from being able to lease their property. Just a month ago, I had a guy call from Frisco, had a house. Hey, I bought a new house. My kids are getting big. They got too many toys. We had to buy a bigger house. I want to rent this one and keep it long-term. Okay, great. Go out, meet with the guy. We get the HOA rules. They're like, oh, you bought the house in 2016, but in 2019, we instituted a rental cap. And that rental cap now impacts you because we already have 20% of our properties rented. You are not allowed to rent your property, period. So he's already moved out of the house. He's already in his new house. He didn't know this, unfortunately, beforehand. So he is only left with one option: sell the property. And he cannot sell it to an investor because they're already over their cap. They're only allowed to sell it to an owner occupant. Well, if you can only sell it to an owner occupant, depending on what's happening in the market, interest rates go up, owner occupants slow down their purchasing because it impacts their purchasing power. Investors who've got tons of cash who would love to buy that house can't buy the house. So he's regulated on who he can sell his house to. So that's a problem. Some of the HOAs have instituted rental caps and have said, oh, if you have a renter in your property, but now we're at the 20% cap, when your property becomes vacant, you cannot rent it again. You have to wait in line behind everybody else who's waiting to rent their house again. So exactly what am I supposed to do with this property that I can't rent while I'm waiting in line for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, a year? Yeah. So again, they're forced into selling that property again. And of course, it would have to go to an owner occupant. Eliminating these investor purchases, it hurts all of us. But it also hurts our investors, because why would you want to go and buy a property in an HOA if you thought rental caps were going to come in and you were going to be forced to sell it before you were ready to sell it? Yeah. So it really has made the investors, take a second look at HOAs and what's happening in the overall market.
I think that's why they also added first right of refusals too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On some of the condos. But you know what? It also hurts the tenant, because actually before this was kind of a big deal, I had a tenant one time that found a rental property that was listed for lease, and they made their application and they got approved and they signed their lease. And then I think the week before they were supposed to move in, the landlord listing agent called and said, your people can't move in after all, we're sorry. And we were like, what do you mean we can't move in? And this was years ago. So, I mean, nobody really kind of knew that HOAs were putting these caps. And it was probably one of the very first ones, because that was the response back is, well, it was because it had been a rental for years. And apparently because it was vacant for like a week in between the first guy moving out, they were getting it cleaned and getting it made ready for us to move in. Someone else put their house up and got it rented, and we were out. We were like, where are we supposed to go? We're supposed to move like in 3 days. We're moving. Where are we moving?
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, sorry.
Another thing about that was this: temporary leases. When you're doing a temporary lease back, buyer or seller, when you're learning those CC and Rs and you're looking at them going, well, no leases, you're going, does that pertain to lease backs too?
Yeah.
And so it's a lease, right? So it's argumentative, of course, because as the buyer, the seller still owns the property, but guess what? Everybody, it's still a lease. So, so that also limits creativity sometimes of how people can actually sell that property, so that can cause a real disaster.
I brought that up. We had a meeting not that long ago at the Collin County Association of Realtors where they brought in all of these like elected officials. And there were these two guys that are on city council in Allen, Texas. They're both named Dave, and they ran together as the Daves, double D. They were the Daves. But anyway, I asked them that exact thing. I was like, all right, because you have short-term rental registrations there in Allen. And they said it doesn't pertain to your short term when you're talking about a seller and a buyer. And I was like, but it's a short term lease. I mean, I had this exact conversation because I said, sometimes it's a short term lease because I'm selling my house and I want my money first, and I'm going to move out like in 2 days over the weekend. I'm going to move out. but sometimes I'm not going to move out for 30 days or 60 days. And I told him, I said, the lease back actually allows for up to 90 days, assuming that the lender would allow it, which they don't. But how long, when does short term become short term? And they basically were like, it only pertains if it's not if the homeowner is not one of the people involved. And I was like, okay, I mean, I get that, because if I was the home seller and now I'm going to be the renter in the house, my name was on the deed. So that was kind of their workaround.
It's kind of like an executory contract in a sense. But see, shouldn't they clarify that?
They should. And maybe it's clarified somewhere.
Why I gotta pull two people in a room and ask them, so what does this thing even mean, right? So that's why when I called we had a situation with the rent back, and it was only for 2 days. I mean, come on, right? I mean, we couldn't even make the deal happen unless it happened, because they needed time to move out. And so basically I called the homeowner association, no tenant renters, none of this, none of that. And I said, they're not giving a third-party rental. Do you understand what we're under a contract to sell? That means an executory contract under the law, because why? It's to sell. And they're like, we don't understand what you're talking about. I was like, I gotta go. I was like, we're done. All right. So basically the whole thing is, where's your lawyer at? Where's the lawyer that wrote this thing? And so I talk to somebody that understands what I'm talking about, because it turns out to be a real disaster, especially when you're talking. And I brought that up for a point, because you're talking to people that don't even know what you're saying.
Yeah.
You know, I call HOA sometimes. I said, hey, what's this? What's that? What's this? What's that? They're like, we need to get a hold of our lawyer. By the time you get a hold of him, that it's over. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The world just came to an end at that point in time. And so we need to understand what we're doing up front. So I think clarification on these would probably be most beneficial. Let's put it that way. I can't tell you how many times I've run into that. Probably at least a dozen times.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's nerve-wracking at best.
And I think, you know, what is the definition of short term? Because what if I'm
anything under 30 days in the state of Texas? That's actually a definition of short term rent. That's
okay. Yeah, because I'm thinking, what if I'm not just here on vacation?
31 days. Sorry, 31 days.
31 days. Okay. Yeah. Because I think that's what people think is, you know, I'm going on vacation, I'm going to get an Airbnb. Right. Yeah. And so they're thinking vacation. But what if you're there for work and you're on a temporary assignment, or you're getting ready to relocate and you've got corporate housing? I mean, corporate housing sometimes is short. Yeah, so again, am I short-term rental if I'm corporate housing?
How about boarding?
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of times where people rent to their own family members, you know, for tax write-offs.
Yeah.
They'll turn into a rental unit so they can go ahead and do a 1031 tax exchange on the primary residence. I mean, there's a lot of things there that need to be clarified of what can and what cannot happen.
Well, and your 1031 exchange is also exactly why Amy was talking about why it's such a problem for an investor. What if I have a house and now all of a sudden I'm forced to sell it? What if I didn't want to sell it? What if I have to, and now I don't want to take a tax implication. Now I got to do a 1031 exchange.
Or put it in Delaware trust, or do something you don't want to do with it, right? You got to be doing something with it so you don't get taxed.
Put my kids in there. Y'all go live over there.
That's exactly right. Get over there, right?
Nope,
just get over. I don't want to hear anything. Just get in the house. Don't worry.
I live there with my kids on the weekend when I come over to help do something.
But you know, you look at it, let's talk about that for a second, about taxes and stuff. If you look at it, you live there 2 out of 5 years, right? If you're married, you get $500,000 exemption, $250,000 if you're single, right? And so you're looking at it going, okay, I'm going to get a tax exemption because of the fact that I live there, so I can turn around and buy a new house. And or if I buy the new house and I do my tax that year, I can still make that exemption happen, turn that money around and maybe pay off the house. So now what are you stuck doing? Exactly what you don't want to do. That's exactly right. So that's horrible. You put something into a situation, or somebody into a situation where you're forced to have to do something you don't want to do. That's another real bad implication of that. And here's the other thing too. The government is trying to get rid of 1031 tax exchanges. Yeah. Did you hear about that too? It's at the federal government level trying to get rid of 1031s because they're not paying their taxes. No, they're deferring their taxes. It's not that they're not paying it. They're deferring it. Eventually, somebody's going to have to pay these things. I mean, you know, everybody has to pay taxes sooner or later. So, you know, it just turns out to be a mess is the whole problem. So,
yeah. I don't know, Amy, have you had any of your landlords be like, man, I just got forced to sell some properties. Have you run into that?
Yeah. Yeah. That guy in Frisco last month, he's like, I can't believe this. I can't believe. I said, well, you could move back into it and rent your other place. I mean, that's an option too. He's
But
like,
he
yeah, I
wasn't
don't want to live there. We don't have enough
That's
room
why I
there.
moved out of it.
But he wasn't an
Yeah.
investor, right? He was just some Joe Schmo guy that thought, I own this house, I can do what I want with it, which, by the way, I think is worse, right? Than maybe
Which
somebody.
I think most people think that way anyway.
I would think that way.
Mhm.
Right. I mean, I bought a house. I can do what I want. That's the whole thing. When I lived in the apartment, I couldn't paint the walls pink and purple polka dots, but I buy my own house. I can do whatever I want on the inside.
That's right. That's right.
But
But you know, it impacts the everyday homeowner. I mean, we have most of our clients are not your traditional investor that they didn't wake up one morning and go, I want to go buy a rental house. No, they had a house. They didn't want to sell it. They wanted to rent it for whatever reason. A lot of people with the economy the way it is and the job market the way it is,
they
they don't know where they're going, right?
Yeah.
So we've got a ton of people from California that are here. Hey, we're going to come. We're going to stay for a year. We'll see if the job works out. We'll see if we like Texas. Some of those jobs have worked out. Some of them haven't. They've gone back to California. A lot of people were told they could work from home. So they said, oh, well, we can work from home anywhere. Well, it's cheaper to live in Texas than it is to live in New York. So we're going to come to Texas. We're going to live in Texas and work remotely. Oh, now we're being told we have to go back to work in the office. So now we got to move out of Texas and move back. So there's a lot of different reasons why people rent their houses, and a lot of them are not your traditional investors. And so, you know, I had one lady say, hey, my mom's sick in Ohio. I just need to go to Ohio for a year. She's expected to live 5 or 6 months. Can you just rent my house for a year and I'll be back? Well, we could. We'd love to, but your HOA won't allow it. So what are they going to do with that house for a year?
Man.
Let it sit.
Dude, that's
even worse.
That's a crappy situation.
That's worse to let it sit.
Yeah. And there are, you know, a lot of HOAs have hardship exemptions. You can apply for a hardship and see if they'll give you the approval, but you got to be careful with these HOAs. A lot of these new ones, you know, I don't know if they've all gone to the same, you know, how to change the rules HOA class, but a lot of these new CC&Rs state in the CC&Rs that if you sign a lease with somebody and they deem for whatever reason that property is not allowed to be a rental, that you have given the HOA the explicit right to be your attorney in fact to terminate that lease and evict those tenants as they see fit. Who would sign off on that?
Well, here's the problem. I'll give you an example. People that buy into HOAs would sign off on that. You know why? Because they don't read them.
They don't read them.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've sold property in HOAs, POAs, you know, whatever.
Yep.
Hey, have you read this thing? Oh, yeah.
Nope.
You know, they sign it and off we go, right?
No, it's 5,000 pages of goop.
Yeah, that's right. And then all of a sudden they get a ticket for parking their car in the front yard or something. They're like, they can't do that. Then they flipped it through. Oh, yeah, they can. You know, so that's when they actually start reading this stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's why, as an agent on our side of things, I try as hard as I can to say, hey, this is a long read, or I'm just going to tell you, this is long, it's lengthy, but it's well worth it.
Yes.
You need to know the rules before you play the game.
Yep.
That's right. That's exactly right. I mean, they got.
Well, go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was gonna say, they got a rule for everything. So you just want to make sure that I tell you, plants and everything, you name it, they got a rule.
Well, and this is where I want to go with that is, you know, the rules before you play the game when you buy the house, because maybe you did get a good realtor who told you need to read it and you did do a good job and you did read it and you were like, I agree to these rules. And then you buy the house. And then a year later, 3 years later, they change the rules.
That's right.
So it's not even enough just to read the rules and buy the house. It's like, now you got to go to all the HOA meetings and you better be buttoned up and you better be reading that crap that they're emailing you saying, we have a vote coming up. We have a vote coming up, because if not enough people showing up to vote, then they're changing the rules. And boy, if they change the rules while you're already playing the game, I mean, that's why I don't like playing Monopoly with a 5-year-old. They change the rules. I can never win. Yeah. Right. Halfway through, all of a sudden, Park Place is $1.
Yeah, they're always the banker too, by the way.
Right, they're always the banker.
They can't count, but they're the banker.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Don't change the rules while we're playing the game.
Yeah, or at least make us more informed. That'd be absolutely.
And
nobody reads
a lot of them have included some grandfathering. A lot of them have not included any grandfathering at all, and that makes it tough.
Well, I heard some of them were trying to go back retroactive. No.
How does that work?
That would be hard.
For them to be like, well, maybe it's not necessarily retroactive, but saying, okay, on this date, here's the new rule. And anybody who's already here, that's it, because now that it's happened, all of those are now under this new rule. So maybe you have a lease that's a year and it's 6 months in. Well, you're under the new rule already. So that 6-month lease is now under new terms. So
this kind of sounds weird, because I mean, I'm going to get all kind of legal on you if you want. This is called latches. I don't know if anybody's heard of this before. It's actually called latches. Latches, and latches means loose, which means if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah.
Right? So if you don't use the law, you lose the law. So that's why a lot of things like retroactive might not work out very well, and statute of limitations, you know what I mean? Like after 2 years, you can only go back. That's called latches. That's the rule of latches. And so you're looking at it going, what are they doing, and how many rules are you bending to make something happen? Does that make sense? And you're looking back on this going, if you really wrap your brain around a lot of this stuff, you're going, well, wait a second here. This never should have happened. Or why did I get caught up in this? Or why is it that you're changing it now? I think there should be a lot more guidelines on how they can change them, notifications of the change. You know what I mean? Not just, all right, starting now. You know what I mean? Because everybody's like, well, what just happened? What just happened? I used to be able to park my car in the front yard. So I think it's also catching people off guard too, and and I believe they're profiting out of that in a lot of senses, but they're also damaging a lot of people in the same process. And the only people that can make any changes is us. We got to vote on this stuff, like you said. When they say send out a vote.
Yeah,
we need to get involved in this stuff, because it's harming everybody in the field, not just the person that lives there. It's a trickle effect, and it's sad.
Yeah,
I can't tell you how many more HOAs are popping. Look at all these counties, you know, like they don't have really zoning in country, right? If you're looking at out in the country where they got HOAs, so they're popping up all over the place, and we just need to start getting more restrictions on them. They came out with a couple in 2021 that were some pretty good restrictions, but nothing that pertains to what we're talking about.
No.
We're
expecting more this year, though, hopefully, with the legislature meeting.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're in session. Is this on is this in the queue?
It's in the queue.
We'll
what
see.
It looks like today versus what actually will make it all the way through, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's what you mean. They can go halfway through. We got 140 days to deliberate it. It'll get to day 70, but it gone. You know what I mean? So we don't know. Or somebody will fight it somehow, rewrite it. You know how it all works. So we'll see.
Yeah. I think it's important though that people know what's happening. So that they can make their voice heard. And if this is something that's a concern for them, that they need to tell their elected officials, right? Because that's where it's going to come from, is when the elected officials make the change, then there's that top down management, so to speak, from the state level. It'd be great if we didn't have, you know, how many cities are in Texas? Like, I don't even know, 200 something counties.
254 counties. So,
right. 254 counties. And and every county's got lots of cities in it. And so every municipality's got a different rule, right? And that's a lot to keep up with. It'd be kind of nice if it was a little bit more centralized, maybe. I don't know.
The form.
Yeah.
You know, and as realtors, like I was saying, like us, I mean, we got Tree Pack to help us out too. I mean, we just need to kind of push it along. Let's put it that way. Maybe put more emphasis on it, because eventually it will affect us more and more and more.
Yeah. Well, let me ask another question that's rental related, not so much property management, but kind of rental related, but that's in the real estate space. What about these neighborhoods that are being built for rentals? Like, here's a whole neighborhood of single family homes, and we're not going to sell not a one of them. We're just going to rent them all. That's, of course, a big property management situation. And of course, they're not going to harm themselves by putting crazy rules into their HOA or whatever. But if they build in a city that's going to have some kind of registrations and stuff, what does that do to that whole entire community and that investor that just came in and spent a boatload of money building a boatload of houses?
Well, there's a lot of national builders that are doing build to rent. They have found that they can make a lot more money if they build an entire subdivision, 200, 300 houses, make them all rentals, and then have that as an asset instead of building one at a time and selling them individually. So build to rent, I think, is here to stay. We still have a shortage of housing. We still have a shortage of affordable housing, rental housing. We just have a shortage across the board. But I think in the build to rent communities, a lot of them have on-site maintenance. So it's very similar to having an on-site property manager for an apartment complex, and they have a lot of rules. And so I don't think that you're going to see, issues with those as much as you see with the HOAs having rules within those communities, because you've got owners next to non-owners, et cetera, in the regular communities. In those communities that are all rentals and they're all regulated as rentals. So I think build to rent is here to stay for a while.
Well, and I expect, like you said, they're not going to build their own rules to their own detriment. But earlier, like at the very beginning, one of the first things you said is that cities are now charging these rental registrations.
Yep.
So if I built you said Mesquite, for example, was a place where if I own a house in Mesquite and I want to rent it out, I'm going to have to pay this fee, and then I got to have it inspected. And then you had to pay for the re-inspect, even though they didn't re-inspect plumbing. If the city's doing that and I build an entire neighborhood of 100 houses, they're charging me 100 rental registrations.
Yep. Every single one of them.
Now here's something that just kind of crossed my mind. Another reason why they're making you register is taxes, property taxes, because people are lying and so on, saying it's a homestead when it's not. Let's think about that too.
Oh yeah.
They're making a lot of money off these rentals because they don't have that 10%, threshold. They can go as high as a point in time. So if you register to tell them that you're no longer homesteaded, guess what?
Now they're going to pop
hand over fist is what's going on. See what I'm saying? Everybody see that?
Yeah.
I just thought about that. I was like, oh, wait a second here. These people are getting also taxed to death.
So
there is no 10% cap. I saw a lot of
10%.
our properties go up
12,
unbelievable
15,
amounts of money.
Like commercial properties have gone up 22%, something like that.
Yeah. Nothing's for sure but death and taxes, right?
Yeah. Well, the legislature's got a huge surplus this year, and they said property tax is one of their biggest priorities to try to, figure it out and make it better, revamp it, whatever. We'll see.
Okay. We'll see how all that works out.
Yeah.
It's probably why it's important to go to the Hill visit. Gotta go down to Austin as a realtor, show our support. Hey, we're here and we want to fight for property owners to have the right to do what they want with their property. But also to be able to protect, because you have a right, if you are the neighbor and the Airbnb next door is just a party house or whatever, you have the right to, live in your house peaceably, right?
Sure.
So maintaining everybody's rights at the same time. Right to do what you want, but right to also have that peace.
Right. Absolutely. And I think you're right, Melissa. I think if code compliance was funded the way they should be, and we're able to manage the neighborhoods and the communities like they should be, then it wouldn't be a problem to begin with. So, why don't we fix that problem instead of going after everybody else over here on this problem?
Sounds like the municipalities weren't doing a great job, and now it's all of our problem.
Yes. Yeah.
Things that make you go,
Yes.
Man. All right. Well, Amy, is there anything else you need to cover with us today and tell us all about all the rental registration and property management and all the things? Anything else you want to cover?
Well, I think back to Stephen's point, you better investigate what you're buying before you buy it and stay informed, because the rules do change, the laws change, the rules change, HOAs change, and every time they get a new set of board members, their focus changes. And so you got to be prepared to look at that. And, of course, I would always recommend, if you're looking at doing any type of rental real estate, that you hire a professional property manager that is trained and knows what they're doing. In Texas, it is required to have a property management. It is required to have a realtor's license to do property management and to collect rent for others. So don't have your brother Bob or your Uncle Bill manage the property for you while you move out of state. Find a professional that knows what they're doing and can keep up with all these rules and regulations and make sure you stay in compliance. So.
Yeah. You know what? I do have a question, because that brings something up. So what if Uncle Bob is managing your property and he does not have a real estate license and he gets you into trouble? Who's really in trouble, you or Uncle Bob?
Well, Uncle Bob can actually receive a cease and desist order from the Texas Real Estate Commission.
Okay.
Because they will do that if they find out that someone is doing property management without a license. But ultimately, the landlord and the owner of the property is the one that is the one that's going to get in trouble. So
Yeah.
if you want to have some protection in there, you want to hire a property manager to keep you out of trouble.
Ain't that the truth?
Mhm.
Awesome. Well,
So-
thanks so much for being with us today. I super appreciate it. Stephen, did you enjoy hanging out with Amy today?
Absolutely. I learned a lot.
Property
Also
management's so fun.
Hey, I love property management myself. So, me and Amy, we got kind of the same kind of, I guess, weird mind frame, but it's changed over the years. And I had somebody the other day, just on an end note here, I had somebody call me the other day and say, you got to have a property management class just for investors. No. Abort. Here's your class. Hire somebody. Have a great day. All right. Because likely what you're going to end up is in court, sued. It gets kind of crazy, and it's just not worth the time. And it's not even worth the effort to even go into it. You'll lose more than you gain.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. And so that's why I always encourage people, like Amy said, hire a professional, know the rules, know the regulations, and take a property management class, or about 28,000 of them, whatever you're going to do, make sure you understand what you're doing before you get out there, because even like she said, even the contracts have changed. The TXR forms have changed. And so you're looking at, the TXR lease is changed around a little bit. There's new rules, regulation when it comes to flooding now, right? The 54-0, which landlord has to tell the tenant that they're in a floodplain, 100-year less floodplain. So there's a lot of stuff going on out there that we should definitely be aware of before we even attempt it. And these laws don't only pertain to realtors; they pertain to everybody. When you're looking at property codes and all the rest of it that kind of trickle down, like she said, federal law, state law, not just us, it's everybody that's involved in this thing. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Somebody they can trust. That's why they got to hire somebody with a license that knows what they're doing.
Well, I appreciate being on your show, and I can't wait to hear it when it comes out. It'll be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. We are so glad you were here. Okay, so everybody who's listening, check us out here. Follow us at State of Reality Podcast, and join us next time, because we're always talking about all of the real reality of the real estate profession. We'll see y'all next time.
have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.